Am I on? Can you hear me, right? Thank you, everyone, for coming. So my name is Balki. I'm a Senior Director of Engineering. I'm also a mentor at Plato. I've been a mentee for over 5 years, so one of the first mentees. Always loved the platform, and a couple years ago, I became a mentor as well. At least a couple mentors I worked with here, so thank you. Background, so this is quite a niche topic, at least in my mind, and I chose this topic for two reasons. One, when Plato and team reached out to me about a topic for the conference, I was in the hot seat. So, we were doing really well with building features. Like most of you, we were also doing well if there was a big Sev1 escalation, right? So all hands on deck, we would resolve and get praise. But the Sev3, which we'll talk about what Sev3 meant for us, always fell through the cracks. And I was in the hot seat because there were a number of customers that were contract renewal risk. And among the big list of things they were complaining about, there would be 2 or 3 Sev3s that we just kept putting off. And I was responsible for those as engineering leader. So also the second thing is, over 10 plus years as an engineering leader, when I reflected what I did about these Sev3 issues, I felt like I never formalized or thought and focused on how to formalize this process. So that's why this was top of mind, and I chose this topic. A little bit of background about the company and our engineering team. So Support Logic is an analytics and insights company, specifically for support managers. So a best use case I can talk about is companies that have anywhere from 200 to 300 support escalations. They have 20 plus support engineers and some managers. So when a new support ticket comes in, our tool would look at factual data, like where is the support engineer available, what are their working hours, and then combine ML insights on top of that and do that matchmaking. So which engineer is best suited to work on this ticket. So very, very helpful productivity boosting tool for support engineers. The size and scale, we're a Series B company, raised a lot of money, 100 plus employees spread around the globe, and almost half of those are in engineering. So, and you'll also learn why such a large team in engineering, comparatively speaking. So we have one CTO, and then a number of directors, several teams, typical setup. The focus of today's talk will be for core workflows team, though, so the team I was leading. More around the context and the product background. It's a typical B2C SaaS product, B2B SaaS product, but a horizontal software product. So for folks who don't know what the term means, it's an ambitious undertaking for any size company, especially for a small Series B company, right? So we have hundreds of features across many, many pages on the website. Each unique subset of features is important to a specific customer. So a customer A would care about these 7 features spread on 4 pages. Customer B would care about 12 features on a different page or different set of pages. So it's almost like a custom solution, but delivered as a SaaS product. So some classic examples of B2B horizontal products, classic examples are Salesforce, right? If you can imagine, they have thousands and thousands of features. Shopify is another example. AWS is another example. Some of the more successful horizontal software products, recent modern software is Notion and Figma. They're quite successful as horizontal software products. So we were ambitiously going towards that. Again, the focus of this talk is around non-critical but important escalations, right? So we're good at when there's a Sev1, as I mentioned, we all jump in and take care of it. But these things fall through the cracks. Some of the attributes of these bugs are features that won't work perfectly, but have some sort of workaround, right? So every time a customer sees this bug, they grow 2% annoyed and frustrated. So they sit there no one wants to solve them because they're not high priority enough. Like the conference agenda on my phone. I didn't realize there was an app, but when I look at the agenda on the mobile, I can't figure it out. So at this company, we had anywhere from 50 to 70 such escalations. We call them customer found defects, CFDs. I don't know if anyone is familiar with that term. Each month, we were only able to close 80, 70% of those, so like 45 to 50 of those, which meant there was a growing backlog, constantly growing. And the escalation process was chaotic and non-scientific, right? So literally any one of the 100 people could raise their hand and raise the alarm, like, oh, this customer might churn, so we need to work on this. What that meant is a lot of work in process. While we're working on one thing, something else would bubble, like whack-a-mole all day long. How many of you familiar with this matrix that I hate? Right, so it's an eye candy chart, but not practical in my opinion, right? So a number of my engineering leaders that joined along with me were like, oh yeah, Balki, we can do this for support logic as well. This works great. And I'm like, no, it doesn't, but I'm willing to try. Again, the focus is on priority 3, the 2 green boxes. We were not even setting such an ambitious goal like 5 days. I knew it was not possible to resolve these in 5 days. We're thinking more like 45 days, and even that was just not possible in our setting. I know it works in some settings, but I knew it wouldn't work for like where we are and what type of bugs came up. When we went back to our real world with this ambitious plan, in my world, nothing changed, right? So as soon as we wanted to do something similar, there were endless prioritization requests from new and existing and future customers, bubbling from all areas of the company. Conflicting priorities between feature requests and bugs, and within bugs, and so on and so forth, the same old story. So I wanted to change something, so I came up with a simple proposal. It's so simple, I want you all to say "da," right? So as soon as I show you that, you have to say "da." So my proposal was to select a finite number of priorities. I call them top 7 priorities, that we would treat them like royalty. Like any given time, we would pay utmost attention to those 7 priorities, and the whole company would rally behind those priorities. So I worked with the head of our customer support and delegated the list to him. So he had that big list of all the CFDs, and he was responsible to narrow down those to 7. All the stakeholders would channel their requests through this head of customer support, because I believed he would have the most empathy for context for the customer issues. I set some very basic goals and ground rules. So we would optimize for completion and not for stakeholder satisfaction. I'll talk more about that a bit later, but what that meant is once we select an item to be on the top 7 list, we will not look at anything else until it's resolved and approved to be closed by the customer. So, you can relate to this, right? So the whack-a-mole, I wanted to avoid the whack-a-mole. So we make some progress, and then we put that on the side. I didn't want that to happen. So it's a classic Kanban scenario, but with strict adherence to the completion. Other small related process changes I made, I would meet with the head of CS weekly. Me or one of the engineering leads would meet. And for a couple of reasons, the head of CS never had this level of attention from the engineering team. So again, he felt like royalty, that we would be able to meet every week. We would track what items we are working on, as well as if you're closing and working on the right items in the last 2 weeks, 30 days, and 90 days, etc. Some of you might have come here because of, you may have thought there's a secret sauce to this prioritization. So sorry to disappoint you, there's no secret, but these are some of the factors I came up with this, right? So again, the head of CS and I worked together on coming up with these attributes. The first 4 or 5 are quite obvious: the number of customers reporting an issue, size of those reporting customers, how much revenue they bring to us, etc. But I wanted to talk a little bit more about the last 3. So time to contract renewal, very specific number. This is the nature of the world today, right? A lot of churn happening in the industry. So we were worried about that too. And when it was time for the renewal conversations, I didn't want my item showing up on that checklist of things. So I wanted this to be an attribute. In fact, the company decided to give highest weightage to this one factor. We just didn't want to minimize the churn. Another thing that's my pet peeve, when we put so much attention on something, many times the customers are like, don't respond to us. We want to recreate an issue, we have focused on this for you, and then they just go radio silent. So that's my pet peeve. I don't encourage that behavior. So if that is a pattern, I will not take up this as a priority. And the last area is the signaling mechanism, my signaling to product teams. So for example, we had a lot of tech debt around our alerts infrastructure. And the product team was not cooperating with us and investing in rebuilding it. So if there was a bug in the alerts area, I would say, no, I'm not making that a priority. We need to invest in more of the long-term things. So all of these, we use simple Excel formulas to apply weights, and at the end, it spit out those top 7 priorities, and those would be, we had some leverage to drop some things in and out, but for the most part, it worked really well over time. So that's the prioritization algorithm we used. Some of the outcomes and lessons, I was expecting a miracle but we came pretty close to it, right? So I was expecting and hoping the backlog would go down quickly and that everybody would live happily ever after, but the reality was not that close. So backlog actually increased slightly. I believe it happened for other reasons, but wishful thinking, right? So it did increase, but customers who mattered and the stakeholders were quite happy. What we said, what we would work on, really paid attention and got those to closure. So that really helped. And then some learnings and lessons. Some cliched quotes here. So focus is the art of elimination. So it's better to focus on a few things rather than trying to conquer it all. Simplicity. So compared to that fancy matrix, just picking a few priorities and focusing on those. And also, many of us are used to that matrix style, like SLA-driven prioritization. It's okay to challenge such established standards. Some future opportunities. So we met recently. We did this for a quarter, good results. And then one of the things we want to do, so like many startups, our engineers who worked on the features also worked on these bugs. So that worked for our size. But one of the proposals we're going to try, experiments we're going to try is pull a couple of engineers into a sustained engineering team. So they would have literally 100% focus on working on these SEV3 bugs. So that's something we're planning to try. I'm on the fence about that. I've worked with sustained engineering teams at large companies. It's hard to hire and scale and train them. So I'm on the fence, but I'm willing to do an experiment. Any questions you have on that proposal, I'm open as well. So that's the end of my presentation today. So thank you all for coming.
Thank you, Balki. One thing that I forgot to mention as I kind of started here in a hurry was if you have any questions, please use Slido to post your questions. We will review it and get it answered for you here. We have a couple of questions that's already kind of come up there. So let me start with the first one here. Often customers report customer-reported issues are hard to reproduce. So as a bug is left hanging, assumed resolved unless we get further reports sort of thing, what do you do in those cases?
Yeah, that's a good one, right? So if you saw one of my attributes was, are they cooperating with me in recreating this, getting on the phone, trying to either recreate on our environment or reviewing logs on their environment, right? So if all else fails, that's a tough one, right? So, but I hope I answered your question, right? Like when they cooperate with us, 99% of the time we can find the root cause and resolve the issue.
Cool. All right, going to the next one there. How would you scale your proposal of 7 priorities as the company grow? Do you think 7 would be enough?
Good question. So I called it 7 because that was my initial hunch based on the backlog. But very quickly, within a couple weeks, we had to increase it to 10. And as we go to this support sustained engineering team, we'll probably settle at 15 or 20. So yes, we have to scale with that number with the company. But I would still say it's better to focus on a smaller number, maybe somewhere in the teens, versus just don't proportionately scale that number. It's better to focus, get to resolution and celebrate, pick up the next one.
Does that, as a quick follow-up to that, does that number also depend on the size of your customer support or your teams or any of that sort of stuff also? Like if you have a bigger customer support team, maybe we can do top 15, right?
Exactly. So yeah, my first part of my career, I actually led sustained engineering team. So at one point, that team was bigger than the engineering team. So yeah, it all depends on what type of customers you entertain. So we have enterprise-grade customers. It's hard to reproduce the bugs, so it takes more people and more effort to troubleshoot and resolve these bugs. Yes.
Sweet. Cool. Thank you there, Balki. Another one that we have here, also a very good question here. What kind of data and metrics were crucial in making those top 10 customer-found defects model effective?
Yeah, so one thing that we couldn't solve 100% was I didn't pay attention, but the head of CS caught on to this, right? So even though there was this company-level focus on top 10, top 7 bugs, there were engineers who were sneaking up and working on items that were not part of those top 7. They were either they had relationships with specific people. They weren't even thinking, but just working on these things, right? So it was the percentage of tickets they were working on that were not priorities was higher than I was comfortable with. And our head of CS found it, and that metric we tracked and made sure that we coached those engineers. We chose these top 7 for a reason, so make sure you're working on those and not others.
Makes sense. Cool. All right, thank you. Going to the next one here. How would you prioritize engineering-owned goals if it is not part of the head of customer services?
Yeah, good one, right? So these are specifically CFDs, all things coming from the customers. So, I mean, if you're talking about the ones that attribute to tech debt, so we talked about alerts infrastructure, right? So I inserted that one attribute to send signals to my product team, we are getting these bugs, which means we have to invest in our alerts in our infrastructure. There were other examples there as well. So both in the short term and long term, automation is another one. So we didn't have much automation when I joined. Oh, Manpreet is here. So my partner in QA automation is here. So we try to dedicate some time for increasing our automation as well. So those things kind of happen in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, automation is what kind of saves us. At some point, maybe AI would help.
Always.
Just use the buzzword there.
Yep.
Cool. Going to the next one here. We'll probably take just one more question after this, just for the time considerations.
We have 10 more minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, so my
We're good.
thing
We're
was
good.
short.
Cool. All right. was there any consistency in the source of bug inflow, and how did you work with the product team on reducing or addressing the root cause? Goes back to like tech debt, maybe.
Yes, yeah, Jeremy, yes. Similar answer. So we did, over time, we used Jira, like many of you, and we started adding attributes to which area of the product, alerts, I keep saying alerts, like that kept popping up as a big source of headaches for us. So again, we use that signaling to make sure we are investing appropriately in those areas that had more tech debt. I don't know if there was more context to it. Cool, thanks.
All right. Going on to the next one that's highly voted here, about creating dedicated engineering team, handling top customer found defects. No engineer likes to work on these escalations. How do you keep such a team motivated and focused?
Yes,
that's a good question there.
Yeah, very good question. So like, as I mentioned, I created and led sustained engineering teams earlier part of my career, and it was not a fun job. One model we did back then, almost 15 years ago, was hire somebody like non-technical, like from code schools or things like that. It's a growth opportunity if you can, right? So one company, we also had people in customer support, technical support departments. It was a small upgrade to what they were doing to work on these CFDs. And the career path was somewhat clear that, if they know enough context about the product, they would be a great addition to either QA teams or the product teams themselves. So that career path is what we pitched, and it worked really well. But we also wanted to complement those inexperienced folks with some experienced folks. That's where a little bit of a tough time. So one or two people that have the experience who can coach and mentor these inexperienced engineers. So that's where I had to use my charm and and influence to have people rotate into these teams. In fact, when we created this proposal, that included some people rotating for 3 to 6 sprints at a time to work on these CFDs.
Sweet, thank you. Go into the next one. This is also a really good one here. Given the macroeconomics that's happening right now, how are you balancing building a new team versus doing more with less?
Yeah. To clarify, we were not getting new budget for this team, so don't ask for budget. So it was going to be within the members from the existing team. And the size of that team was also negotiation exercise. So to work with our executives to see what percentage of the whole engineering team could we run an experiment with. So it was between 2 and 3 people for the size of our company and the size of our engineering team.
Cool. Yeah, I was just saying that maybe we just go from top 7 to top 5.
It's a balance.
I'm kidding. All right, here's another one. On the sustain team, how do you keep the team from burning out because they're always fixing another team's defects? So any support sort of a team has that sort of a pain of like, darn, this is not even my problem, but we have to fix it. So how do you kind of handle that? Yeah.
So in most startups I work, again, like I keep insisting that I'm still on the fence about this sustain engineering team. It's better for people who create the bugs, quote unquote, create the bugs to work on those bugs, right? So, but in this case, to fight this burnout, our proposal was to, like I mentioned, engineers would rotate into these teams between, like, we settled on 6 sprints, I think, so like 4 sprints, sorry. So would be there, and then somebody else would rotate in.
The next one, I really like this question here. So how does this model actually influence the way you communicate with your customers regarding defect prioritization and resolution? I kind of took it as like, how do you tell your customer that, hey, your bug doesn't matter?
Yeah.
Right.
I was really hoping there's none of our customers here. But yeah, I mean, this is an internal conversation, and what we are comparing to is your bug is going into a black hole versus, if it's important enough, this will become a top 7 bug, right? So in my opinion, it's an upgrade. We don't know when this will be solved versus we are prioritizing using this objective model, and if it's a priority, it will be resolved, and we'll handle you with white glove treatment and royalty.
Cool.
Again, to an extent, it was my head of CS problem.
Cool. Another one, kind of pointing towards our next topic of talk also. Did you see a positive impact on internal team burnout?
Yeah. I mean, engineers are such introverts. They never say good things. But with this model, they constantly told me like how this focused helped them, right? So definitely, it was a positive for the engineers.
All right. Few more questions here that we can take. Could you share an example of the priorities? Are these domain-based or feature-based or something else? How do you kind of define those priorities?
I mean, the bugs. I'll talk about the types of bugs, but if you want to clarify who it says anonymous here. So I had some examples, but I forgot to talk about them. So it would be like, again, like we had hundreds of features spread across many different pages. So it would be like a CSV download of this graph times out would be an example, right? So again, it would be only a subset of customers would use that graph, and then another subset of them would care about the download, or they would not have all the columns they were expecting. So these are the types of things. Or certain graphs on a page take longer to load than others, for many different issues. So feel free. This is a small group here. If you want to clarify that, feel free to ask.
Cool. If there are no clarification there,
Is AI generating these questions? They're not ending. I like it though.
No, great questions, by the
Yeah.
way. Thank you. Thank you for keeping it flowing here. I think this one's already somewhat kind of what we kind of answered there. Have you considered putting emphasis on working on the root cause, preventing bugs in production, like improving quality through automation and all that sort of stuff? I think we've already kind of answered that. Unless there is anything more to clarify there, I'll skip through that.
Yeah, like most companies in that phase, right? A few engineers like just churning out features for too long, and then end up with not much automation and a mishmash of architecture. So we did, Manpreet and I spent some of our energy in building up the automation there. So it was helping, but at the same time, we were pushing more and more features without full automation.
No, totally. And here is an actual ask right now is, can you share that Excel sheet that you use for prioritization algorithm there?
I'll try to get it, but full disclosure, I don't work at that company anymore, so I don't have access. So
cool. Few more here. What is your take on reviewing patterns on high influx bugs? Mm-hmm. Do those convert to tech debt initiatives?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, at least philosophically, right? So we can't do with everything, but the most obvious patterns like alerts and other areas, definitely during my tenure there, we kicked off some tech debt initiatives for sure.
Nice. All right, the next one here. How does it impact long-term strategy and OKR? Looks like it could be a distraction sometimes.
Yeah, it's definitely a distraction, right? We talked about, there's thousands of priorities we, as engineering leaders, we work on, but the 3 buckets are features, these, bugs that fall through the cracks, and Sev 1, Sev 2 priorities. It feels like many of us are good on those feature building things and then the high Sevs, but it's a distraction. But in my mind, it's like important but non-critical, right? So it's where we arrived at is allocating the right amount, agreed upon at the company level. Is it 5%, 10%, and then spend that time on the most important thing. So it's a distraction, but something we can't just ignore these days.
Cool. The very last one in the last 30 seconds, so let's see if we can get this too, is we really like the idea of having a contract end date as one of the parameters. Anything you would recommend on how we would approach the same for a B2C?
Oh. I never worked for a B2C company, so I'll admit I don't know. Do you? You're at LinkedIn, right?
Yeah. So some of the criteria that we kind of used there was kind of looking at the frequency of number of impacted customers. Unique customer impact essentially was one of the factors that we kind of took in there, and also like how big of a feature is it, right? Is it costing the company money or not? Was also another factor. Just like how we was kind of talking about, like these are the prioritization metrics. We also internally had our own little prioritization metric there based on unique member impact, how many users are actually. If it's like a key feature on the feeds page, it's a higher priority sort of thing. So it's like how visible of a feature is it, and how much of a money are we revenue in the way losing also. Lots of tools internally also that LinkedIn kind of created to monitor some of these also. So it kind of made it a little more easier there. But thank you once again, Balki, for sharing your insights.
Amazing. Thank you for the great questions.
Thank you all for all the questions here.